Hello, my name is Nicholas Junker, and this is my introductory video for AEP 855, Educational Leadership Module 1. Some personal demographics about me. I grew up in a small town called Cuba, Kansas, and about 200 people. I grew up and lived there until I was in the 8th grade, then moved when my school closed down to Republic County High School, which is the school I actually currently teach at. I then went on to Lindsborg, to Bethany College, played football there, really enjoyed my experience. My girlfriend, and then eventually my wife, Kelsey, and I both went there together. We really enjoyed it, small town life experience. Then in our first jobs were at Larned High School, where I taught high school social studies, and I was the head softball coach, assistant girls basketball coach, and assistant girls tennis coach. Kept me pretty busy. And then while we were there, we got a corgi, as you can see here in the picture, tri-corgi named Oakley. He is the light of our life, and so he's a fun little guy that we have and we enjoy. So from Larned, I went on to graduate school at the University of Kansas, and while there, I was a PE teacher at Topeka Seaman. That was an experience that taught me a lot about elementary students, lessons that I hope to not learn again. And so knowing that every person, every teacher has their expertise, and it was definitely a learning experience. And so after about a year there and a year in graduate school, I realized that I really missed high school teaching, and so I moved to Clifton Clyde High School, which is close to where Cuba is, where I'm originally from, and taught there for a year. And then in May of that year, a job came open at Republic County High School right around the same time that my mother got cancer, and so it kind of worked out where when she got cancer, she actually worked at that school as well, and so I was able to move to that school to take care of her a little bit and to work with her in that place and until she passed just about a year ago. And so it was a good experience, and I think that if anything that I found in this interesting set of circumstances we've had is that family is vital, and it sometimes takes a backseat sometimes to your work, but it definitely shouldn't. So a little bit about where I work. Has a pretty strong academic achievement, pretty high ACT scores, pretty strong growth of bachelor's degrees, and kids leaving with technical training and certificates. We're very traditional, old-fashioned school culture, being in rural Kansas. Very traditional style. I would say not really very progressive, but it fits the needs of the community and the stakeholders at large. We're trending towards a younger staff. Over the past, I would say, 5 to 7 years, there have been considerable amounts of retirements and older teachers that have moved on, and so we're trending toward younger staff. We just completed a bond construction last year, which was very positive. Added a new gym, had some considerable spending into the school building, which was positive for the community, and so that was important. A couple things at Republic County High School that I'm specifically involved in right now, besides teaching social studies, being the basketball coach, and also being the junior high football coach, is our KISA process, and those KISA pieces that we are specifically looking at in our accreditation cycle this juncture, which I've helped out a little bit with, are relationships and relevance. And the two things that I'm specifically involved with are senior project, which is like a senior capstone experience where they have a job, interest, they complete a project and a research paper, and it's a pretty good thing that we've done. That's for relevance. And then we've done a seminar improvement, which is about developing relationships and those kinds of things, and I helped with some restructuring this year. And we also have a new superintendent. He came last year. He's done a really good job of ushering us into some more progressive ideas in regards to collaboration and problem solving among the staff. So really heading towards a pretty positive place in our school district. So the question was, what do you think is the biggest pandemic teaching challenge? And I think the one that we focus on a lot in our school, and I specifically focused on, was about we already always have educational gaps in our schools that we're attempting to close. And I think that the pandemic exacerbated those issues. I think that specifically the groups I listed, at risk, SPED students, and students, general education students as well, had issues with that. They really normally get a significant amount of support, and by being online, they were not able to do so. And a lot of those students didn't have the resources, whether it be internet, whether it be time, whether it be having to take care of siblings. That kind of leads into that challenging home lives. It was a significant challenge, and we are seeing those gaps still today, how those challenges existed in the pandemic. And so I think that's what I would say was the biggest challenge is the equity for all students wasn't there, because we weren't able to deploy those appropriate measures to try to close those gaps as to a greater degree as we were able to when in-person education existed. So we're looking at the 3 types of mindsets and whether we agree or disagree with the research. So the 3 most important ones that we have is that all students can grow and learn, social capital and teamwork will always outperform individual talent, and happiness is a choice. So taking a look at it, all students can learn. This is the type of mindset. It's a growth mindset. It's when you consider it's defined relatively as a belief that an individual believes their intelligence is an aspect they can grow, and if they think that and they feel that and they believe that, they will be more motivated to achieve that. I definitely agree with this statement. I think you'd be hard pressed if you were an educator and you didn't believe this. So in some of my research throughout this process of my graduate degree, we've taken a look at some of Carol Dweck's research, and some of her research specifically hints on the fact that mindset and belief and motivation can have a direct impact on performance and achievement, and I think that's paramount into understanding that your mindset can have a positive impact on student achievement. Second, the mindset is that teacher collaboration over isolation, and kind of the hint is social capital and teamwork will always outperform individual talent. The kind of definition that I came up with is this mindset is defined by the notion that when teachers are able or pushed to pool intelligence, experience, and circumstances there have a greater impact on student achievement in all facets of the school. I have experienced this quite a bit. There's a teacher that I work with in my school. He's a math teacher. He's been at a variety of diverse school districts, but big schools, small schools, and we really work together to a great degree. And we're driving together a lot of our goals, especially as a senior project, as I mentioned before. And so we're driving those goals forward. And I know that his intelligence pushes me, and our collective experiences make for a better overall student achievement and better overall growth for us as well. And I definitely agree with this mindset, and I think that it can be challenging at times, but I think that the growth of a staff in a progressive environment is vital to providing an opportunity for students to grow. Third and final is that happiness is a choice. Talks about happiness and optimism. The idea is driven that happiness will bring about success and growth, not that success and growth bring happiness. This theory kind of blends and is similar relatively to the growth mindset. This data suggests that mindset can drive success for professionals. The idea is that teacher happiness leads to student happiness, which in turn has a positive impact on student achievement. I think of the 3 principles, I think this is one that I do not necessarily support wholeheartedly at times. I think that it obviously the data does lead towards this suggestion, but I don't know if I wholeheartedly put this on the front burner. I think that it absolutely can, and I think that there are teachers that are happy, that do drive student happiness, but I think that there are times where teachers have, I would say, more of a work mentality that is not necessarily antithetical to happiness, but maybe doesn't drive that forward, and that work mentality maybe can be outside of that mindset. So when we look at dispositions, we're looking at 5 dispositions of successful school leaders. So I put them into kind of 2 categories here. Things that a school leader would do or as an affirmation of authority, and then another one as there are passive actions. So they fit into those 5 dispositions, fit into those 2 umbrellas. First is affirmation of authority, fits in confidence. And I think one of the things that's most important as a coach, and I do a little bit of administrative work on the side, is that it is hugely important for a leader to have confidence and be able to make decisions and choices in that setting. And if they're not, then they're individuals that are with them, and whether it's students or whether it's teachers, they don't feel like they're heard or they're able to be led in a way that's positive. And so I think having that confidence is important. Not necessarily to be egotistical, but at the same time providing an opportunity for input. But when it comes time, you have to have that confidence to lead. And that kind of trends into the second one as well. It's about being decisive, but also being a risk taker. As an administrator, it's important, and I talk to my kids all the time about this, and other teachers as well. It's always important to take a look and evaluate the status quo. And as we do that, I think there are some times where we have to change structures of what we do as educators, and that's really hard and really challenging. And I think that can be really scary at times for teachers who are, I don't want to say it in a pejorative way, but necessarily set in their ways. And I think a strong school leader who has confidence can drive that change. And then there's a set of passive actions that I think there are passive actions in definition, but I think that they are active as you develop them as a school leader. First is a learner. I think as a principal, as a teacher, as a person who is continuously trying to grow themselves, I think being a learner is the greatest understanding you can have. We have a superintendent now, as I mentioned. He is new, but he is always constantly reading and sending articles and developing our understanding about current research, and I think that's amazing. This is one of the first superintendents I've had that have done that, and I think that's awesome. You have to be empathetically assertive, which is sometimes a challenge. I think sometimes it can be challenging for individuals to not be integrated into the process, but we have to try to be empathetic about that, try to help build what you think are the appropriate attitudes and behaviors, show people the data, show people the resources that you know that'll help you get to that juncture, and but also make sure that, hey, once it's time to go, it's time to go. And then I think all of it helps with, and I mentioned that about the KISA process that we're endeavoring with our accreditation, and part of that is just relationships, and I think that blends into both of those, sense of humor and empathetically assertive, because I think if you don't have a relationship with your staff, they're not gonna follow. And I think regardless of how much confidence or risk taking you do, if you don't have that relationship, then it doesn't really make much of a difference. So here's the 3 practices of a successful school leader. The 3 that I obviously they hit on in the article were focusing and prioritizing, examining feedback and data, and emotional intelligence. I think there are so many things that a school leader is responsible for that focusing and prioritizing are hugely important to their success. I know that my administrator a lot of times says that his day can be bogged down by minutia, and I think that's partly his fault, but partly the way in which that our structure of the job is. School leaders have a lot of things on their plate, and if they don't focus and prioritize on specifically student learning, student achievement, and faculty growth, I think that you can get lost in some of that minutia. So examining feedback and data, this is something that we have really taken a strong approach at Republic County, trying to drive our data from our assessment data to our survey data, um, and taking that and not wasting the amount of effort that we put into building that data and trying to drive it forward, but also not being marred up in analysis, but also driving that notion forward. Also, it is important to have understanding of emotional intelligence. Your faculty, your staff are hugely important and influential to the way in which you're trying to grow your school. And so it's important for you to be able to engage others, be able to focus on sometimes not just work, to be interested in their life, to make sure everybody feels valued in the workplace, make sure everybody has that ability to feel comforted and to also that work isn't the only thing, but also to try to ask and have conversations about them, their life, their school, their family, so that way school feels more like a family to them as well. So now we're going to look at the 8 principles of ethical leadership. I've kind of pared them down into 2 specific ways. One is reflective traits, and the other is taking more look at a more active approach. So first and foremost, it's personal confidence, and I think that is hugely influential because it's important for a administrator to be able to see something that is occurring, whether it's in the school, in the community, in your district, in a classroom, and say, this is something that we need to look at, evaluate, and provide opportunities for growth. Secondly is putting public interest ahead of self. It is vital and hugely important that the things that your school needs and your stakeholders need, they come ahead of your personal thoughts, feelings about a specific issue or a policy. And I think that's sometimes that can be challenging. I can definitely consider this and think about this in the era of COVID and about masks and vaccines and those types of things. And I think that we really have to consider what is the most effective means or methodologies for educating our students. We had all kinds of disagreements and arguments and public debate about modified schedules and different scheduling and open, having students be able to come back or having them learn at home. And so I think that's something that is vital for a school leader, is to have that public interest ahead of what your own personal beliefs are. And then something that's kind of a reflective understanding is self-control, self-discipline, and integrity. As I've worked for two or three administrators, the ones that I really valued were the ones that were always honest. They were always ethical. And I trusted them, and I had a respect for them that was made me want to work harder for them, made me want to collaborate more, and made me want to drive my classroom and my instruction further. And so I think that's pretty important. So here are the 5 other ones that I think that can be expressed, that you can see and drive forward and build an understanding on. First and foremost, it's task and employee centeredness. Your greatest resource as a principal is your staff. And so if you are able to focus on a little bit of the needs of your staff and the needs of those tasks that the staff are trying to accomplish, building on the success that they have, building on the strength that they have, then you can drive yourself towards that task. I think sometimes principals think that they need to shoulder the entire load. I have been in schools that administrators have done that, and that doesn't provide the best results. There was a reading that I looked at and said a lot of times it's that you are the smartest person in the room is the room. And so the idea is that if we can collaborate, we can build an understanding. I think that's really important. And also looking at recognizing talent. A good leader knows who his good teachers are. And I think that's something that I've seen from my current administrator, is that he tries to, first and foremost, build strong teachers, and those that are not as strong, he pairs them with stronger teachers and relies on those stronger teachers to try to drive that and to make sure that those people stay, giving them. We actually had a new teacher come in the last couple of years, and she was and continues to be a really strong teacher, and he knew that as a small community we struggle sometimes to keep those strong teachers if they're not from the area, and so he's providing opportunities for her for professional growth, and she's embracing those, and hopefully that'll keep her around just a little bit longer. And then requiring high ethics from everyone. I think that's as the administrator, as the leader, you set the standard. And I think the phrase "walk the walk" cannot be too much overemphasized. Looking at sensitivity and understanding, I think this is the part of maybe where a piece where I struggle with the most, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. I think that I am very grounded in data and the data that drives instruction and education. And so sometimes I have a little bit of a challenge to me sometimes about the sensitivity and understanding of maybe the community can't get behind something even though it's been proven on a pretty consistent basis in the data. And so that can be something that can be a little bit challenging. And then inclusiveness as well, making sure that you get all stakeholders involved. That's something that we've really been trying to drive at Republic County, is that we need to make sure that we are getting everybody involved. So business owners, students, people from around the community, city leaders, driving them to assist us and build an authentic process of educating our students so that way they can go out and be positive contributors to that 21st century world and environment. So looking at my mindset, I would say the couple of things that I hint and I specifically state each one at the end. So looking at teacher collaboration over isolation, I would say that something I struggle with is I get pretty comfortable by myself with island teaching, as they call it. I'm pretty comfortable because I know that I'm currently up to date on a lot of the educational trends. I have one or two teachers that I consistently rely upon for feedback and improvement, and so I don't really venture outside of my I would say zone of comfortability, and I think that's definitely something that I need to work on. And as I mentioned before, I would say that in terms of the mindset of the happiness and optimism can drive success, I'm gradually working towards that. I think that's a more progressive mindset that I have not been driven to yet, but I think that's something that I'm willing to work on and drive towards, but definitely not there yet. And then I think one of the things that I struggle with, and it kind of correlates to all of those, is I believe that in its faulty mindset that not everything can be solved with greater dedication to pedagogy or content. My family, I'm a fourth generation educator, and so I think that because of that, I think that everything can kind of be solved with a little bit of elbow grease and some hard work. And sometimes it's not just about what you know or what you think drives you to success. It's about building those bridges and with students and stakeholders going forward. So kind of the disposition, I think that some of the pieces that maybe I struggle with or aren't as great at is student versus teacher communication. Looking at being empathetically assertive. I think it's vital for teachers to be empathetic, but I think that a lot of times, sometimes we have, especially in our school of late, sometimes we lose the content and the structure because we're attempting to bridge those gaps in terms of empathy and understanding and emotional characteristics. And so I think we do that, but I would say that that's a weakness. Sharing of professional learning, I think, is vital, and I think that as a small school, we only have one other social studies teacher, and so I share with that teacher, but I don't know if I do a good job of sharing that with others, and I think that can be a significant challenge. And then confidence and frustration in the island teaching, and so I think that. As I mentioned before, I really feel confident in my craft as an educator, and because of that, and because of my grounding in the data and the grounding in the new research, I feel like, why can't we just do it the way in which the best do it and the best suggest? And sometimes stakeholders in communities aren't as willing or able to try, and maybe their processes have worked for them. And so that's what's unique about our state of Kansas, is that we all have the opportunity in that local control to try to build those processes going forward, and I think that's amazing. And I think that as we develop will only continue to get better. So to my current teaching practices, often I choose complexity over simplicity when you're looking at focus and prioritizing. So I think that there are times where I choose the big ideas maybe instead of the integral pieces that are necessarily could be the focus. I know I do that in my instruction for sure. I do that sometimes as a coach as well. Sometimes I'm more big ideas and more nuts and bolts, which definitely can hurt at times. I definitely struggle with staff that are passive. I mentioned before about that I'm a big data guy and a big research guy. I think that's how you drive yourself forward in understanding your content and improving yourself as an educator. And so with that, I think I tend to struggle a little bit with staff that maybe are not as able or wanting to embrace the research and the data. And so I think that's something that I have to improve on in my emotional intelligence. And also that's something that I would definitely say my wife would critique me on as well. And I also think that I create too many goals and objectives. I think that when I consider my teaching practice and also as a basketball coach, as a football coach, I have too broad of a scope for what I'm attempting to accomplish when I need to maybe just pick a few things or one thing and drive success towards that instead of building this such a broad picture and trying to paint everywhere. And so I think that's something that I'm aware of and trying to self-diagnose and try to drive forward. So I had a critique of understanding the principles of ethical leadership, lack of focus on staff-centeredness. And then we have sacrifice sensitivity for progress. I think that can be a struggle, and I think that's something that I definitely struggle with because as I mentioned before, driving that forward, that big data, and sometimes I'm not as I don't acquiesce to feelings, thoughts, or structures that have existed for a long time, and so I think that brings that challenge, and that kind of trends into the last piece there under ethical leadership and inclusiveness. Everybody's ideas have merit. And I think even those ideas that have been proven ineffective through research, maybe they fit the needs of the stakeholders at the current juncture. And so maybe the ideas of the research that have been proven effective maybe aren't ready to be deployed yet in terms of the way in which the students and the stakeholders are involved at the current time in your school district. So how does all this support the educational success and well-being of each student and adult? I think it provides an opportunity for you to self-reflect. I think that looking at dispositions and mindset and principles of leaders allows you to see what do I do, what is best practice, and what is in the research. And I think that's important. And also, I think that also matches skills to your future actions. And so I think what we see, what are the best skills based on the research, and then how can I deploy my abilities, my interests, my understanding of those things to drive my own practice forward. And if I'm successful and I'm a strong leader going forward and I'm a strong teacher going forward, I'll be better and more apt to serve my students and my stakeholders. So finishing up here, wrapping up our course learning outcome, the standard correlation, I wrote these out, is throughout the assignment we were challenged to read about professional dispositions and norms, placing a focus of the growth of educators into successful administrators. Strong focus placed upon ethical behavior and values as it relates to being a strong school leader. Secondly, this assignment was relevant because the assignment broadened my scope regarding characteristics or behaviors that may not always be outwardly apparent. I think that's something that I was intriguing to me is through looking at the research. There are specific things that are unseen, and I think that's unique to administrators. Is sometimes it's not always doing something. But it's an attitude and how you carry yourself as an administrator. Learning about the introspective or unseen standards necessary to become a successful school leader contributed greatly to my current learning. And then kind of reflecting is throughout the assignment, I was able to garner important information about successful school leaders while also evaluating data which supports the prescribed skills, characters, and techniques. Assignment was also very introspective as I was able to turn a lens inward to build a theoretical inward profile of myself as an administrator. It was very helpful to understanding areas of improvement going forward. I think anytime that you can reflect on your practice and where you need to go it is vital to your growth as a learner, vital to your growth as a school leader. Here are my references for this presentation, and thank you for listening to me.